Tonight, as the U.S. Navy is conducting a blockade in the Strait of Hormuz in a war Donald Trump started, MS Now reports the head of the Navy has been fired. Dane Phelan removal was driven by his poor relationship with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and other senior Pentagon officials, a person familiar with the matter said. Earlier today, the Pentagon released a statement announcing that Phelan is, quote, departing the administration effective immediately. They gave virtually no explanation. It is just the latest upheaval at the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth, who has been firing top generals and other senior military officers, including the Army Chief of Staff just a few weeks ago, as this war continues. Sarah Mark Kelly is a Democrat of Arizona, former Navy captain, serves on the Armed Services Committee, and he joins me now. Sarah, it's good to have you. And first, just your reaction to the rather sudden firing of the Secretary of the Navy in the midst of a war in which a majority of the country's naval assets are in the theater of war, and we are actively engaged right now at this moment in a naval blockade.
Yeah, and on top of that, Chris, we've expended an extraordinary number of munitions, Tomahawk cruise missiles, SM-3s, other things. So we've got a problem, and it's up to the Secretary of the Navy to make sure the Navy is trained and equipped adequately, for threats against our country. Whether it's, there in CENTCOM or in the Western Pacific with regards to China. So this is bad timing. I'm pretty sure I know why this happened. We have a Secretary of Defense who was ill-equipped for this job, the most unqualified Secretary of Defense ever. And who knows, the real rationale for why, this happened. I would suspect we might find out at some point that, Secretary Phelan had some opinions and offered some suggestions on policy that the Secretary of Defense didn't like.
We know the Secretary of Defense has had pretty tense showdowns with other secretaries, including, the Secretary of the Army. Very well reported. They had a standoff over promotions of women and black officers who were up for promotion and that were being blocked by Pete Hegseth. We all know that he fired the Army Chief of Staff just a few weeks ago. It is striking, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of tumult and upheaval, particularly in the midst of active conflict.
Yeah, it's chaos. It's not surprising. Firing Randy George, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army, he was one of the most professional, qualified members of the armed forces in a time when we're at war, when this administration has even suggested that we would put troops on the ground in Iran. Not the time to get rid of the Chief of Staff of the Army, the leading uniformed member of our biggest fighting force. It makes absolutely no sense. Hey, these guys are flailing, from the top down. The President, the Secretary of Defense, they do not know what to do. And that's what happens when you have a president that gets us in a conflict without any kind of strategic goal, without a plan, without a timeline, with no exit strategy. What's the goal today? They're probably good if we could get the Strait of Hormuz back open, which was open in February. It's because of this president that people across our entire country are now dealing with the higher costs of gasoline and diesel. And because of that, food prices are starting to rise. You talked a little bit about that. People can't afford their lives, and this president, with this Secretary of Defense, has made it a lot worse.
The Secretary of Defense also announcing this week that he's going to get rid of mandatory flu vaccines for the U.S. Armed Forces. You noted that General George Washington believed that vaccinating his troops against smallpox was the key to winning the Revolutionary War and our independence. A founding father from 250 years ago had a better understanding of science and military readiness. Pete Hegseth did strike me as a truly bizarre move for people that are going to be serving next to each other in close quarters. I know offices where it's strongly encouraged people get flu vaccines, and they're not going to be in barracks together in war.
Right. Imagine the flu running rampant on a submarine or an aircraft carrier or in an Army battalion. That puts all of us at risk. It affects our national security. And, here's the thing about science. Science doesn't care if you don't believe in science. That's the way the flu is going to work. It doesn't care.
Yeah.
And vaccines work. And it was a requirement in the military that you get a flu vaccine. They're safe and they're effective. I mean, George Washington, realized that there was, a huge advantage if he would inoculate his troops for smallpox. That was 250 years ago. And this Secretary of Defense, has to, how is he going to relearn that lesson? This is what happens, again, when you put unqualified people in very important jobs.
President of the United States posting something today from one random person on Truth Social urging you to be held accountable and lock him up. I imagine at this point the president saying that kind of rolls off your back because it's sort of become de rigueur for him. Does it even rise to the level? Does a staff member even show it to you at this point?
I barely looked at it. Somebody mentioned it to me. I think I looked at it when I was going to respond to it, right? And I had some kind of response that I approved. Yeah, it doesn't matter at this point. The president thinks he can intimidate me. He picked the wrong guy. I'm not backing down. Right now I'm defending the constitutional First Amendment rights of over 2 million retired veterans, and really kind of all of us. The president didn't like what I said, so he wants to silence me. But, in this case, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm suing Pete Hegseth because when they failed to indict us criminally, yep. And then he is trying to reduce me in rank and take away my pension after 25 years of service, and I'm not having it.
You are one of the few people I get to talk to who has been in outer space and been in zero gravity and gotten to look out the window of a spaceship at a little blue marble of Earth. And given how compelled all of us were by Artemis, it really felt like a magical moment across the world. Were you jealous? Were you like, maybe, I wish I was up there?
Absolutely. I was there for the rocket launch. I was about 2.5 miles away. And the last rocket launch that I saw with people on it in person, I saw in the rearview mirror, from Space Shuttle Endeavour, where I was the commander on Endeavour's final flight. So, yeah, I was really jealous. I, certainly would, trade 10 days in the Senate for being on that trip around the moon. But here's the thing about that. That crew and NASA and all the people behind them made this thing look easy. It's not easy. It's really, really hard to fly faster and further than anybody else, hit a target in the middle of space, and then rely on Sir Isaac Newton, right, to take you around the moon and back. It's not like they have a lot of extra delta V to be able to, just fly back to Earth.
Yeah.
You're relying on physics and math and science. By the way, a reminder to Pete Hegseth about what we can do when we believe in science. I'm talking about the flu vaccine here again. So, it was a great moment for our country. I think it was at the right time. It was needed. It's one of those unifying moments that bring us all together.
There is brand new reporting from the New York Times that has broken since we've been on the air on how the FBI pursued an investigation into a New York Times reporter who reported on and wrote a story about the girlfriend of FBI Director Kash Patel. A person briefed on the matter telling the New York Times that, quote, agents interviewed the girlfriend, queried databases for information on the reporter, Elizabeth Williamson, and recommended moving forward to determine whether Ms. Williamson broke federal stalking laws. In response to the New York Times, the FBI said that, quote, investigators were concerned about how the aggressive reporting techniques crossed lines of stalking, but added that the FBI is not pursuing a case. Williamson wrote an article that published on February 28th about all the FBI resources that were being poured into protecting Kash Patel's girlfriend. His girlfriend's a country music singer named Alexis Wilkins. The New York Times reported at the time this, quote, FBI tactical agents have ferried her to a resort in Britain before a dinner at Windsor Castle and to an appointment at a hair salon in Nashville. Last April, agents in 2 SUVs stood guard outside a senior center in Ronald Reagan's boyhood home of Dixon, Illinois, while she sang for a few dozen young conservatives. To an extent not previously reported, Ms. Wilkins is escorted in her travels by special weapons and tactics team members drawn from FBI field offices around the country. We want to bring in New York Times investigative reporter Mike Schmidt, whose byline is on that reporting we just read from. Mark Elias is still here as well. Mike, tell us what you're reporting.
Look, the FBI went out and interviewed Alexis. They talked to her about the concerns that she had about this New York Times reporter, and in turn went through FBI databases looking for information on my colleague, this New York Times reporter, Elizabeth Williamson. And then agents recommended that the Bureau move forward with a larger, more fulsome investigation into whether the New York Times reporter, my colleague, had broken federal stalking laws through her reporting. And what stood out at us about this is that the reporting that Elizabeth Williamson had done for this story is what we would consider routine reporting, reporting that is asking questions, which is a normal, respected First Amendment practice in the media. But in this instance, the FBI wanted to move forward with looking into whether that had broken the law. And the FBI ran into problems with this investigation when Justice Department officials learned about it and thought that it was in retaliation to the Times story and did not think that there was a legal basis to move forward with an investigation.
The executive editor of the New York Times, Joe Kahn, said this in the story, quote, "The FBI's attempt to criminalize routine reporting is a blatant violation of Elizabeth, the journalist's First Amendment rights, and another attempt by this administration to prevent journalists from scrutinizing its actions." That's according to Mr. Kahn, quote, "It's alarming, it's unconstitutional, and it's wrong." You also go on to report all the other instances where, under Kash Patel's leadership, the FBI has aggressively pursued journalists. You write, quote, "In January, the FBI searched the Virginia home of Hannah Nathanson, a Washington Post reporter, in connection with an investigation into a government contractor's handling of classified material. It is exceptionally rare for the authorities to search reporters' homes as part of such an investigation when they are not the focus of the investigation. In April, after news organizations reported details about the downing of a U.S. fighter jet in Iran, Trump promised to go after an unnamed outlet over its coverage. Early last year, the White House punished the Associated Press over its refusal to comply with an executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Just talk about the reporting in this piece and the statement. I think it's a rather rare statement from the executive editor about the climate for carrying out what your editor describes as normal journalistic duties.
The most important thing to know here is that reporters that find themselves caught up in federal investigations usually find themselves as witnesses, in the sense that the government is trying to identify who our sources are, who we're relying on to publish government secrets or grand jury material or classified information. In those instances, the government can be very aggressive and they can subpoena reporters. And in the case of the Washington Post reporter, they went to what was seen as a very extreme level of executing a search warrant to go to through the reporter's home to get their electronics. In this case, what's different here is that the FBI is not trying to go after Elizabeth Williamson's sources. The FBI is trying to go after Elizabeth Williamson. The FBI was trying to move forward with a preliminary investigation into whether she had broken federal stalking laws through her reporting. And that is just very, very different because it's an attempt to criminalize the basic reporting, the basic asking of questions. And administrations in the past have been widely criticized for simply having reporters caught up in their investigations when they've tried to go after who reporters' sources are. In this instance, if the FBI had had their way, they would have done a full-blown inquiry into whether Elizabeth Williamson was breaking federal law simply through her reporting. They did not want to know who Elizabeth Williamson's sources were. They wanted to learn more about Elizabeth Williamson.
Mark Elias, this is from the original reporting that the journalist did that puts in motion this extraordinary investigation into her. Quote, Christopher O'Leary, a former senior executive in the FBI's counterterrorism division, said that while threats could temporarily change the posture, it was unheard of for the FBI to provide open-ended, around-the-clock SWAT coverage for a girlfriend living in another city. Quote, if you want to be a celebrity or a social media star, get your own security, he said in an interview. Quote, the inappropriateness of this cannot be overstated. It has to be at least put out there that this was perhaps an unflattering depiction of the use of government assets for the director's girlfriend.
Yeah, I think that this is an absolute outrage for three reasons. And I think Mike and the New York Times have hit one of them, which is obviously this is an effort to chill First Amendment activity on behalf of the media. And I think that that is, in and of itself, terrible. But there are two other outrages here. The first is, why is it that that the girlfriend of the director of the FBI is able to commandeer the FBI into a stalking investigation? I mean, like, the New York Times investigates a lot of individuals. They ask questions of a lot of people. They undoubtedly do profiles of a lot of people that those people don't really like. How is it that the FBI wound up investigating in all of those possible circumstances, the one involving the girlfriend of the FBI? And so it's an abuse of power beyond the chilling of the First Amendment. It's an abuse of power that presumably the girlfriend of the FBI director was able to get the FBI to pay a lot of attention to her concerns when they don't pay the attention to the concerns of others. And then finally, I would just point you to the stalking law itself, because apparently someone within the FBI thought that this was worth looking at. And this is 18 U.S.C.'s Code Section 2261A. And what it says is that a crime is committed if you engage in activity with the intent to kill, injure, harass, or intimidate, or place under surveillance someone with the intent to kill, injure, harass, or intimidate another person. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. You're telling me that the FBI genuinely thought that there was a risk that a reporter at the New York Times was trying to kill, injure, harass, or intimidate someone? I mean, this is just a pure out and out misuse of government resources to benefit Kash Patel's girlfriend for the purposes of trying to prevent scrutiny of Kash Patel and that girlfriend and retribution, as you point out, for a legitimate article about her. So this is outrageous. It is outrageous not just because it is going after the New York Times, but because of the misuse of this to try to benefit Kash Patel's girlfriend and insulate her from scrutiny.
You also have to wonder how much more bad press Trump is interested in garnering for his head of the FBI and his girlfriend.
We are reporting on Trump's crash. The approval rating now cratering to 33%, an abysmal second-term low. Longtime allies see that the ship is sinking. Let's start right here. Trump campaign vet Bannon admitting the GOP is facing these defeats. Tucker Carlson has upended the White House's whole week with his new defection.
Defeat after defeat. Now it's a crushing. Now they turned over the whole frickin' state to him. It'll take us a decade to dig out of this.
I do think it's like a moment to wrestle with our own consciences. We'll be tormented by it for a long time.
A long time of torment. I have more on both of those individuals coming up, but I start there because the defections don't come in a vacuum. They reflect an American electorate that is currently done with Trump and what he's doing in his second term. The extremism, the economic failure, the rampant lying, which some people on the right have dismissed when it was directed towards other people or other issues, but now they view it as insult on top of injury, in this case, economic and foreign policy injury. There's a revolt afoot over Trump's failed economy, over his choice to impose this effective war tax on gas. Just 33% of Americans approve of this Trump economy now. And I'm going to tell you something else. Some people may not like it, but one of those elite D.C. narratives has now been proven wrong again when you look at this Trump crash, because we have heard a lot of Republican apologists especially the elite kind of bubbled type of them in Washington. But also a lot of D.C. media insiders talk about how Trump has this resilient base of support. They talk about it like it's some sort of law of physics, like it can't change and it's special to him. And in many cases, that has actually served as a practical matter to exaggerate and hype how popular Trump is or how much you have to deal with him. He is president. No one's saying you can ignore the entire presidency for a term, but whether you think of him as a popular president who has leverage or a lame duck who's fading, that's a big difference. And that narrative that the Republican Party will just stand by him no matter what, or as he likes to say, he could murder on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, that's ending too. Now a sizable third, 1/3 of Republican voters disapprove of Trump. After the months of inflation, the gas spike, this new war, the rolling Epstein secrecy and Epstein debacle that stretched from late last year into the beginning of this year, and new reports say that Trump aides are sugarcoating the war problems. They're afraid to tell him the truth, that that's part of the war policy planning problem right now. And we have reporting on that. We can get into that. But that, I want to point out tonight, is a very stark and public contrast to Tucker Carlson and these other MAGA voices who aren't just telling Trump the bad news, not just going to him perhaps in private. They have access to him and his aides and saying, hey, this isn't working, this economy's bad, this is what people are mad about. No, they're going beyond that. They're doing it in public, as we've just seen. And that's driving the very media coverage that Trump cares about so much. The combined polling crash, the defections, the Iran troubles, all of this now has the right-leaning Drudge Report website likening Trump to Jimmy Carter, whose term fell apart over a gas crisis and high prices, and basically getting shown up by Iran, what Drudge calls war confusion. You know, Carter was a rare incumbent who lost after his first term, like Trump. Now, the second term of Trump was supposed to redeem him as a kind of a leader or maybe a more serious person than his early foibles. And yet here he is tonight, according to Drudge and a lot of other indicators, saddled with Carter problems of his own making and Carter-level polling and Carter failures on policy from the economy to Iran. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes, Mark Twain observed. Well, when it comes to Jimmy Carter, these are some rhymes most Americans would rather do without. Meanwhile, the Republican bid to try to reshape future elections in Virginia just failed. And here's a little more from what I showed you a preview of, the Steve Bannon rant as he took in that news today, going at Republicans.
Defeat after defeat. Now it's a crushing. Now they turned over the whole frickin' state to them. It'll take us a decade to dig out of this. You're damn right you're going to lose the Senate because you've given nothing for people to work for. And right now, folks, take your number 2 pencil out and write this down. We ain't going to be in power.
You're going to lose the Senate. We ain't going to be in power. Get your number 2 pencil for those who don't just type notes on your own iPhone. Now, what does Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones all have in common? Remember what they do now. They have their own dedicated audiences online, and they apparently would rather meet those audiences where they are with, at a minimum, Trump skepticism, if not outright Trump opposition. They'd rather do that now than wait around and look like out-of-touch MAGA elite apologists when this November reckoning comes. I'm not telling you what's going to happen in the November midterms. I don't actually do that. I'm telling you, though, what they appear to think is going to happen. And that's why this is not just about anyone's opinion or voice. It includes that, but also includes what they're bracing for. Now, the anger against Trump around the nation is already reaching Capitol Hill long before any midterm votes are cast. Today, 5 different Trump cabinet officials, you see across the board here, there is some work that sometimes gets done in Congress, 5 different officials showing up and facing some members of Congress who appear to channel the concerns of this angry anti-Trump public.
How fast will the price of gasoline come down?
Again, that is path dependent on when the war and the conflict end. 7 million people losing their health insurance because of the Trump administration actions. That's not debatable.
There's nobody who is legally enrolled in Medicaid who is losing coverage.
That is just not true.
Will you guarantee that gas will go back to $3 again before the end of the year?
No one can offer guarantees about the future.
No, they can't. And on it went like that. Now, Americans blame Trump for the higher gas prices. They can see that direct result from starting the war. Financial outlets have covered the Trump tax for weeks. Here's one headline. This is from a couple weeks ago. We picked that on purpose to note how this has been the state of play. We've noted that it's like a war tax on this very program. Today, Senate Democrats are hammering this point with the cumulative numbers. If you add up the tab, all in, American families have paid $16 billion more. That's not $16 billion. That's $16 billion extra. That's the scale of the tax in a very short period of time because of Trump's war. It's the economy, stupid. Or it's the stupid war hurting the economy, or however you put it. As you're about to see, people are upset with Trump's war economy.
What would you grade the economy right now? Definitely a D. Is there an F up there?
I just really don't think I have faith in this administration.
It's not the greatest economy in the history of our country. It's not blowing out of the water.
Struggling. People are struggling.
The term right now, it sucks. There's hope, but it's not for everybody. It's difficult.
With him, he doesn't have no plan. Everything just keeps going up and up.
He's gaslighting us or delusional. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's not great, and not our best time as a country.
Yeah. The gas is expensive. Gaslighting people about the gas being expensive doesn't work. And those are folks just filling up the tank and going about their day. They're not professional politicians. That's why we do these reported interviews sometimes. You just check in. It anecdotally overlaps with the polling I showed you. Well, why am I mentioning that as the top story tonight in concert with these other developments? Because when you see Trump backers like Tucker Carlson jump ship after so many years of support, and remember, Tucker broke the journalistic rules and limits from his former outlet employers like Fox and CNN to go directly campaign for Trump. He did it at the convention. And he did it again in the home stretch at that controversial MSG rally in New York. So when you see him flip now, that was not that long ago, and you see people revolting before the midterms, and you see the economy doing what it's doing, it is pretty clear that Tucker Carlson, who once privately confided in someone that he hated Trump, a text I mentioned this week that came out in a lawsuit, then went back to supporting Trump, and then went back, he is a self-fact check. He is a liar. I can only say that rarely when we have the proof. But when you have someone's private text like a diary and them contradicting themselves, you can actually document how he lied to cozy up to Trump when he was up. And now he's lying about why he's ditching Trump when he's out. But the big political point is he's out. Tucker and these other folks, they're not following some sort of long, clear ideological plan where, oh, if you do this on the war, that's going to break it. No. They are following their own audience and the public and trying to get ahead of what is already the lowest approval of Trump's second term. Trump's aides may have him high on his own supply. Top MAGA leaders have taken a different route. They are planning their own futures as a future without Trump. And that makes you wonder, if it's this bad now, how bad do they think it's going to get for Trump and Republicans?
No matter what dirty tricks are tried, no matter the intimidation tactics and the disinformation, over and over again, people in this country are showing up and making clear they have had enough of Trump's accountability-free administration and had enough of the spineless leaders in Congress who blindly follow him and allow him to do many of the things he continues to do. And to be clear, after last night, the Democrats have never been in a better position to win back the House of Representatives in November. And yeah, Trump would still be in the White House. He would. But control of the legislative branch of government means subpoena power. It means investigations. It means people will be in charge who are actually going to hold the president and his administration to account. And that matters now more than maybe ever before. Let me tell you what I mean. Earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal broke the news that the United Arab Emirates is asking the United States to throw them a financial lifeline, to use something called a currency swap to buoy the UAE's economy. Well, last night, Trump said he's considering it.
Is there some type of swap possible, currency swap with the UAE to help if they need it? And do you think there would be backlash because it's such a or perceived to be such a wealthy country? Is that under consideration?
It is, but it's been a good country. It's been a good ally of ours.
Now, the question is, when Trump says that he might use the U.S. Treasury to prop up the UAE because, in his words, it has been such a good ally, does he mean such a good ally to the United States of America, or does he mean to Donald Trump personally? Because, 4 days before Trump was inaugurated last year, an investment firm tied to a member of the UAE's royal family paid $500 million for a 49% stake in the Trump family cryptocurrency company, World Liberty Financial. The Wall Street Journal reports that the way that investment was structured steered $187 million toward Trump family entities. Another $31 million reportedly went to entities affiliated with the family of Steve Witkoff. Yes, Steve Witkoff, that guy. One of Trump's top negotiators in the Middle East, whose family co-owns World Liberty Financial. Now, a few months after that reportedly happened, an investment firm backed by the UAE provided the Trump and Witkoff families with yet another windfall, depositing $2 billion into, you guessed it, World Liberty Financial. Now, both President Trump and Steve Witkoff say they have divested from World Liberty Financial and have not been involved with the company or any of its deals since Trump took office. And, of course, World Liberty Financial says that deals with the firm do not grant investors any access to government decision-making of any kind. But here's the thing. This is the heart of the president's family business, his sons, too, these days. This is the heart of it. According to an analysis from Forbes last year, crypto now accounts for the majority of Trump's net worth. World Liberty Financial is the Trump family's crypto company. And according to the Wall Street Journal, the UAE owns nearly 50% of it. The UAE deposited $2 billion in the company, potentially netting the Trump and Witkoff families tens of millions of dollars in interest a year, as long as the UAE doesn't withdraw that money. And now Trump is considering giving his foreign benefactor a huge, enormous financial lifeline on the taxpayer's dime. And his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who could actually facilitate that lifeline to the UAE, is pretending, as he does, that Trump has no conflict of interest here.
Do you dispute the fact that Sheikh Tahnoon, through his company, invested $500 million in World Liberty Financial just before the president was inaugurated? No, you contest that.
I'm unaware of that.
You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. That was today. Bessent claimed, the Secretary of Treasury, he had no clue about any of this. Now, the Wall Street Journal, kind of the paper of record for financial nerds like Bessent, wrote a piece laying all of this out in January. But Bessent claimed, he had no idea. 40 members of Congress even wrote Bessent himself a letter demanding answers on this exact issue 2 months ago. And yet Bessent sat in front of the U.S. Senate today and still played dumb. But as much as Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen held Bessent's feet to the fire today, and he did, that's all he could do. Because Democrats are not in the majority. But if Democrats can get the majority in the House this November, that changes. Letters like this one demanding answers about the UAE's reported stake in the Trump family's crypto business, those would no longer just be strongly worded letters. Those could become subpoenas. Rather than avoiding questions from Congress, officials from the Trump administration would have to answer Congress's questions, often under oath. And there are a lot of questions that the American public deserves answers to right now. Today, Senator Chris Van Hollen tried to grill Trump's trade secretary about yet another potential corruption scandal. Back in January, the Trump administration bought a stake in a rare earth mineral company, giving the company $277 million in direct funding and another $1.3 billion in loans. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was reportedly central to putting together the deal. And wouldn't you know it, so was Lutnick's old Wall Street firm, Cantor Fitzgerald. It was the lead placement agent for the private investor portion of the deal. Now, Lutnick himself is divested from the firm, which is currently run by his 2 adult sons. And the firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, has not commented on the deal. An official from the Commerce Department said that the deal was negotiated directly between the rare earth mineral company and the government, with no involvement from Cantor Fitzgerald. But again, this is one of the issues where Democrats in Congress have demanded answers, and there's still a lot of questions. Democrats wrote a letter to Lutnick about all of this 2 full months ago, along with a detailed list of questions. But today in the Senate, Lutnick still didn't have any answers ready for them.
Can you respond to the letter? Would you respond to the letter by the end of this month that we sent that lays out some of these questions?
I will take another look at the letter and see if we can work together to resolve your issues.
I would appreciate that, Mr. Secretary.
Okay, we'll see. Not holding my breath on that one. Right now, Democrats in Congress are fighting with their hands tied behind their backs. And they are doing a heck of a job trying. But without a majority in either house of Congress, all they can really do is ask the Trump administration to answer their questions. And just asking, clearly, that isn't working. I mean, for months now, Democrats have been demanding answers from the Treasury and the Justice Department about Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS. Late last week, Reuters reported that the Justice Department and the IRS are actually in talks to settle that lawsuit. So the Justice Department, run by Trump's former personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, is negotiating with Trump's IRS, which ultimately answers to Scott Bessent. Yeah, we already talked about that guy and his evasiveness, and Trump himself. Negotiating over how many of your tax dollars they should give Trump. Democrats have been demanding answers as to what exactly is going on there for months. But today, Todd Blanche was asked about, actually yesterday he was asked about it, and here's what he said.
You have the president in the White House pressing, obviously, for some personal money, and then you have him being your boss. How do you sort of, just broadly speaking, how do you sort of handle that sort of issue?
I mean, we handle, the Department of Justice handles complicated decisions involving those type of issues every day, all day, and not just this Department of Justice. Every Department of Justice handles issues like that.
Do they now? I worked in 2 White Houses with many attorney generals, who were in office, there you go. No Justice Department has never had to handle something like that. No, never. That is not an everyday issue. That is a historic, unprecedented act of corruption. And it would be great to be able to show the American people how the sausage is being made there so they can see for themselves just how gross it is. Yesterday, the Washington Post published details from the Trump administration's contract governing the fundraising they have done to make Trump's new multi-$100 million White House ballroom. You know the one. Not only has the White House declined to disclose the total amount raised and the identities of all the donors, but it has conveniently excluded itself from conflict of interest protections. The White House says that this is all just standard procedure, and framed the use of private donations as a, quote, boon for taxpayers. But with no transparency here, we have no idea if those private donors are expecting something in return. And judging from the record here, I suspect many of them might be. Again, Democrats have been demanding answers on this front for months, but a subpoena sure would be handy. What voters did last night in Virginia, leveling the playing field for the midterms, that gets Democrats closer to that goal. But given the sheer volume of scandals here, given the unbelievable amount of potentially corrupt actions happening all over the Trump administration right now, and how much work it will take to get to the bottom of all of it, I think that Democrats can and should shoot for more than just the House. Earlier this month, the Cook Political Report shifted 4 Senate races toward Democrats, the exact amounts of seats Democrats need to gain for a majority. As the New York Times chief political analyst Nate Cohn put it earlier this week, a Democratic Senate is now a real possibility. It's felt that way more and more over the last couple of weeks. And one of the seats that will be pivotal for Democrats to hold on to have a shot at that majority is Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff's. And Senator Ossoff is betting that Georgia's voters care about all of this potential corruption, too.
Never before have we seen so little effort to hide so much corruption. The Mar-a-Lago mafia has taken American corruption to spectacular new heights. But corruption in America runs a lot deeper than Donald Trump. Because how does American politics really work? It's coin operated. Money goes in, favors come out.
For weeks, the Senate has tried to rein in President Trump from the war in Iran by passing a war powers resolution that would limit his ability to launch future military action without congressional approval. But Republicans, they have blocked each and every attempt except for my next guest, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. He joins us now. He is the only Senate Republican thus far to cross party lines and vote in favor of a war powers resolution. Senator, thank you for joining me. It's good to see you. You have been very, very outspoken about this issue. I want you to help our audience understand, why is this so important to you, and why doesn't it seem to be as important to your Republican colleagues?
You know, this was one of the big issues when our country was founded. There was an extensive debate in the Constitution. There was Federalist Papers written, and they all agreed, from Jefferson to Hamilton, they agreed that the power to go to war was an incredible power, a very important power. They didn't want it concentrated in one person, and they gave the power to declare or initiate war to Congress. It's the way it's been. Even up into the Iraq War, even up into 9/11, there were votes taken in Congress. They call it an authorization to use military force, but essentially it's a vote of the full Congress. That's the way you're supposed to go to war. That's the constitutional way. But above and beyond that, even if you were to vote, there's a question of, is there an imminent threat? Is there something that's in our national security? And I actually think we're made weaker by this war. The more we spend and the more debt we incur, that's the real danger to our country. I think the danger is from within, not from without.
So your Republican colleagues, while they might not be talking to me, they're definitely talking to you. What's their argument? Why do they disagree?
I think that some of them are uneasy, and some of them, as we pass the 60-day mark, in the War Powers Act, it talks about after 60 days, the war has to cease unless there's a vote of Congress. So many of them place a much stronger sort of, differentiation at 60 days. I think it's incumbent from the words of the Constitution to do it from the very beginning. But some of them believe after 60 days. So we're getting close to 60 days. I think we're around 50 days or so. So this will probably come up again in a week or two. I think if it comes up after 60 days, there's 4 or 5 other Republicans who may join the vote, and there may well be a majority. That sends an even stronger message, but people also have to realize that it's difficult to stop a president from either party, because the president can simply veto the War Powers Act, and then it would take 2/3 to overturn that veto. So it's very, very difficult to stop a president. But this is why I've also wanted to reform the emergency powers. I think emergency powers should expire automatically unless affirmatively approved. That way, a simple majority would be required to continue a war or to continue an emergency.
But even if ultimately the president could veto it, given that we're now in the 8th week of this war, and every day that passes, right, global energy, trade gets more and more complicated. American lives are at risk. We're in greater jeopardy. If at that 60-day mark, more Republicans stood up and said, we're not okay with this, Mr. President, even if the president vetoes it, wouldn't that send an important message to the American people? Because right now, there is not a voting bloc of the American people who are in support of this war.
Yeah, I think a lot of votes have symbolism, and a lot of votes don't directly change. But you're right. Public opinion is expressed through the representatives, through the Senate, and sends a message to the president. I think the president also, a part of him, really wants the war to end. He sees the effect on the economy. I know the president pretty well, and I don't think he likes to see loss of life. Now, we've been incredibly lucky, though, and I think that leads to more bravado, because we were able to go in and out of Venezuela without a loss of life. We've had in and out with a very few losses of life in this Iran war. And so many of them think, oh, we can do things with impunity. But I think also there is an ultimate...
May I interrupt for a moment? If the president had looked at intelligence going into this, he would have seen this is different from Venezuela.
Yeah, and I think also the ultimate goals of this are to get them to give up enriching uranium and maybe to give up their enriched uranium. And I don't think they're going to do that because they've lost a war militarily. They would give it up if we made them by occupying them, or they might give it up if we were to trade things such as reducing trade restrictions and sanctions, or actually releasing some of the money that is being held up by the banking system that they've earned through trade. So I think something more is going to have to be given. And so that's why I've been saying about diplomacy, that insulting them or saying we're going to destroy their civilization or using Old Testament language to say, you know, our God's going to smite their God, I don't think are productive at this point. They know our military might. They've seen it. They know we completely dominate militarily. But still, to get some kind of diplomatic solution or to get rid of the enrichment or enriched uranium, I think it's going to take negotiation.
Well, then it sounds like this was ill-conceived from the start. I want to ask you about Virginia, because Virginia voters last night approved a new redistricting map that could net Democrats up to 4 additional House seats. I want to get your take on this, because the president and other Republicans have already said what happened last night was rigged, but this redistricting bonanza has been going on both sides for quite some time.
Yeah, I fear, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I fear that it's going to lead to violence in our country. I think when people feel like the voting system doesn't work or they're not represented, I mean, Virginia is very much a divided state. So is Texas, so is California. Texas and California a little more dominant, you know, than Virginia. Virginia's almost evenly split. And right now it's 6-5. That kind of represents Virginia. Sometimes it's 6 Republicans, 5 Democrats, sometimes the reverse. But 10-1 will leave a lot of Republicans feeling disenfranchised. The same way Democrats, which comprise maybe 40% of Texas, are going to feel disenfranchised to have virtually no representatives. The commissions, I think, have been a good idea, where Virginia had a commission that created their districts. It's not perfect, but 6-5 sort of represents Virginia. And so I fear that when we redistrict things, in the end, it won't be practically good. It looks like it's going to be a wash. And if Florida does it, it's going to be almost 14 new on one side and 14 new on the other side. And all we're going to have is everybody in those states are going to be unhappy, and you're going to get the same result. But you'll have sort of spoiled the system such that gerrymandering was always a problem, but now it's just become disgusting.
Well, the president said it was rigged. Was it rigged last night?
Oh, I don't know anything about this specifically. I don't know anything specifically about the election. I do know that the idea of gerrymandering so significantly that the minority party has no representation. That's what happened in Virginia. It was supported by President Obama, supported by leading Democrats. But yes, it was also supported by Republicans in Texas. It's in a race to the bottom to see if we can have a political system that does not represent the minority, whether that be Republican or Democrat. It's a bad idea, and I think it's going to lead to much more tension in our country.
I'm not disagreeing it's a race to the bottom, but if one side starts and the other sits idly by and lets it happen, well, then they're just going to get run over. I want to ask you about the partial government shutdown, because according to Secretary Markwayne Mullin, the Department of Homeland Security could run out of money, right? Could run out of money for paychecks in May. That is only 9 days from now. Why can't Republicans get this done? The government should not be running out of money when it comes to paying government employees.
Yeah, I think compromise requires 2 people. It's both Republicans and Democrats. I think there is a compromise where the administration would admit that some bad things happened with ICE enforcement, that they've instituted these reforms, they're going to do a better job. Some of that has already happened. We have a new head of DHS. You don't see on the nightly news things happening in Minneapolis anymore. They took ICE agents out of the streets. Homan said, we're going to punish ICE agents that misbehave. And all of a sudden it was out of the news. So it took some leadership. And I think Tom Homan, frankly, provided that. But I think saying that and putting that into the legislation, that there are going to be some reforms. But on the other side, there are many people who say the Democrats won't take any reform. They think they're winning by not voting for any ICE money because there's such anger towards ICE. So really, in the end, Republicans are going to fund this thing all by themselves. And we've never had that before. This will be the first time we have appropriations done by one party only. But it is making it, much more polarized and much more partisan.